Welcome. So today we're going to be responding to the Joe Rogan podcast. Well, not responding, we're going to be just analyzing what was said. And also we are going to be, however, responding to my last video. So I want to clear up some things on that video. I want to go over what was said in the podcast. And then at the end, I want to actually discuss some of the comments on my last video and address some of them. So first of all, obviously, this whole Joe Rogan podcast brought some more attention to my video. Now, I didn't realize Joe Rogan was actually going to make a video with Terrence Howard, so I kind of got lucky with this one. And for the new people that have came to the channel from that podcast and seen the video, I want to thank you guys for watching. Thank you guys for supporting or just viewing the video, whether it was you gave it positive feedback, negative feedback. I want to thank you for taking the time to look at the video and let me know your opinion. So yeah, I think that's as a small YouTuber, that's what you really want. You really want some sort of reaction and community, and you look forward to getting comments on your video. You know, when you start making videos, you don't get no comments. So as soon as you get a bunch of comments like that, it's really exciting and you love it. So thank you guys for watching that and for commenting. So that being said, if you are new, this channel is basically focused around generational excellence. So that being, you know, creating a society with more knowledge, wisdoms and opportunities than you had when you were growing up. And obviously when you look at generational excellence, it almost sounds like a utopia compared to the society we have now. But that's kind of what this channel is based around. So we discuss self-improvement topics, mindset topics, and we also look into, you know, interesting things like this where people are challenging, you know, the mainstream concepts, mainstream ideas, and bringing in new theories and putting new theories to light, which is what I commend. And I think it's actually a very important aspect for generational excellence, because for society to prosper, you need to challenge the norms, the normalities of things. So again, that's what this channel is about. Got lots of things to discuss on here, and if you're new and that sounds exciting to you, then feel free to subscribe. So the last video, now I have also seen some other reaction videos to the podcast and talking about Terrence Howard's theories. Some of them I liked, some of them I didn't like, in the sense that I think they ripped into Terrence Howard's character a bit too much, some people are calling him crazy, calling him a nutcase, calling him like arrogant, all different words. And that's not what we're going to do in this video, okay? That's not aligned with generational excellence. So we're not going to do that. We're not going to attack Terrence Howard's character in any way. I didn't do that in the last video. I won't do it in this one. We're purely going to, you know, take it serious, and we're going to look at some of his ideas and just discuss what he said, because at the end of the day, I think it's an interesting topic so far. So the last video, I think some people took it that I was kind of against Terrence Howard, and okay, maybe it was kind of my fault as well. I did put debunking in the title, but you have to understand, when it comes to YouTube and getting your video out there, certain words like debunking have a bit of significance, right? So of course there's a bit of marketing in there as well, but I am not against Terrence Howard. In the video I even, you know, said, and I commended him for going against the mainstream, coming up with his own ideas and thinking for himself. And that was the main purpose of that video. I wanted to emphasize the point of thinking for yourself and not blindly believing what people say, whether it's Terrence Howard, whether it's some other scientist, whether it's the government, you know, whether it's a random conspiracy theorist that you're watching. There's always these two sides of, you know, extremes, and I don't think you should blindly believe any of them. And going into a bit more detail about these divides, I think these divides actually are what hinder society to make some sort of progress. You know, we have, like, you can look at the left and the right, or whether you believe in this theory or that theory. Even in the comments of my last video that I made, people were going back and forth and having like arguments, which even some of the ways that you guys were talking to each other was irrelevant to the topic, and you were kind of insulting each other a little bit. So I think society is really dictated by some of these divides, and I think what it should be, instead of these divides and opposing each other in a non-constructive way, it should be more of a constructive divide, where you say, this is what we believe, this is what our side believes, let's come together and really hash this out and work out what is the truth. And we're getting to this later, but you know, when Terrence was talking about him reaching out to other scientists and them kind of just rejecting him and not really hearing him out, that's the kind of attitude that won't get us, you know, any further. Especially when Terrence Howard, he's an actor, he's got influence, people are going to listen to his theories, so surely if you're a scientist, a mainstream scientist, you would want to have a conversation with him and put him on the platform so you can get to the bottom of all this. But we'll get to that a bit later on. So the main point and the angle that I took in that last video was that people shouldn't just blindly believe what other people say, especially, you know, when you may not be prepared to do some of the research that comes with it, or the detailed looking into the sort of theories and things that they're talking about. I think it's pretty easy to just watch a video, you know, of someone speaking about a theory, but to actually go in yourself and maybe try to understand both sides, understand the mathematics, it's a bit more difficult. And especially, you know, when you look at that video or you've watched that podcast episode and then going around to find other sources, you know, of information or mainstream science that kind of goes against it and making your own decision. It's a difficult thing and it takes effort. But also, I think the reason there's such a divide is because it resonates with some people, what Terrence is saying. And why does it resonate with some people? If you look at one of the extreme sides, right, there's a side that believes, you know, the government is against you. It's all a kind of a matrix, if you want to call it, and we've been lied to, and it's all about control. You know, they want to control the population. And obviously, if Terrence is right, it can ultimately confirm some of those biases that these people have. Now, again, I'm not saying it's not the case. It could well be the case. The government could be against us. All these conspiracies and stuff could be true. But what I'm saying is that it's important to separate maybe your biases that you might have when you're looking into a theory or analyzing what someone's saying, because, you know, even myself, I have to be honest, even in myself, there may be certain biases that in some sense I would like it if Terrence was correct, because it allows you to, I guess, take less accountability for you not being in the position you want to in life. And to explain it a bit more, it's like, you know, if you believe the government's against you and the world, you know, they've been lied to and you've been manipulated, then if you're not in a successful position, the successful position that you want to be in, you have something to blame. And I always like to look at the fruits of the mindsets in terms of the heavy conspiracy theorists versus, you know, people who are analyzing and making their own decisions. And the fruits of the people who are analyzing and making their own decisions are a lot better. They're a lot more positive. They're a lot more successful compared to some of the heavy conspiracy theorists who believe, you know, the world's against them, it's all against them, and there's no hope in that sense. But I think we're going on a tangent now. Let's get to the next point. So the next point of the last video that I made was that the whole root 2 loop thing, and I was explaining that you can actually get that root 2 loop using other numbers. Now, this was again made before the JRE podcast, and when I had watched the clip, Terrence Howard spoke about, you know, this root 2 loop and that it only works when you use root 2, right? Or when you use the number 2.
Divide it by 2, cube it again, and I want you to do that until the end of your lives. And that number will still come up with 2.828, 4271, 2174, 6190. Any other number that you, above 2, that you put in and you cube and you square, cube and square and divide by 2, by the 6th operation, it has moved into an exponential number that you can't even imagine. Any number below 2 that you do that same operation with, it will go into an exponentially small matter and number. This is what we call a loop. It is illogical, it doesn't make sense, and it does not make math make sense. So these are some things that I'm bringing to the fore and that I would like to question. I would like to...
That is all I was explaining, is that you can get this root 2 loop with any other number. So again, I was just emphasizing and questioning how Terrence Howard's maths, you know, relates to the theories that he's saying and whether or not he understands conventional mathematics. Now, I can understand why some people would be triggered by, you know, Terrence Howard's mathematics, and I'll give you an example. So let's say that you watching this video, you have an idea and a concept that you've been using, right? And you have some form of mathematics which is accepted by loads of people, and you use it and you use it every day in your life and you see that it works, right? And then I come along and I say, you know, your foundations are off, the mathematics you're using is not correct, and it should be like this. Now, that's fair enough. You know, I have every right to say that and to challenge your theory. But the problem arises when I then start to explain why you're incorrect and explain how your concept works, and my explanation of your concept is incorrect. You're going to be a bit triggered. You're going to be like, wait, you're not even explaining my idea correctly. What you're saying is not even how my idea works and how my idea should be. So you're going to get a bit offended by that. And I think this is why people are a bit upset over the whole 1 × 1 = 2 thing, because again, Terrence Howard's version of, or definition of, multiplication doesn't match the mainstream, you could say, definition of multiplication. And you can just Google multiplication, the definition, and you'll probably get 2 definitions, one for multiplication in like a general sense and one in a mathematical sense. And you can see for yourself that his version then goes against what it says for multiplication in mathematics. And then I would obviously, after that, I would argue, okay, so do we need another form of multiplication, one that is for, Terrence Howard's definition and allows you to do the things that Terrence Howard is talking about with all his concepts and theories, and then as well as, the actual mainstream current definition of multiplication. But I think this is where, Terrence Howard hasn't really, again, explained how his multiplication works in his current theories. He's explained his theories, but he hasn't made that link yet. And I think that's what people are struggling to see, the link between his 1 × 1 = 2 and, his recreating the rings of Saturn and all this stuff, which we'll get into a bit later on. So this video is already around 11 minutes long, so feel free to get a glass of water, coffee, tea, and then we can get into the next part. The next part being the podcast itself. So obviously he starts off talking about him remembering being in the womb, right? It's actually pretty crazy because I made a video about why you can't remember your own birth like a while ago, and it was just a light-hearted video and a bit of fun really, and just some ideas I was thinking of. So it was about why you can't remember being born, but not necessarily why you can't remember being in the womb and stuff like that. And I left a comment on that video, as a pinned comment, as you do, basically saying if anyone remembers their own birth, let me know. And I guess Terrence Howard is the guy who remembers his own birth and remembers being in the womb and stuff like that. Obviously, he said he had some knowledge, and as he started to grow up, he would have dreams of, certain concepts, I guess, or, the dreams were giving him hints of certain concepts. And throughout, his life, through his struggles and trials, he always came back to these ideas and concepts and really, wanted to take hold of them and formulate them into the stuff he was now talking about on the Joe Rogan podcast. Now, he also mentioned that he had or at least he felt like he remembered it from before the womb, if you get what I'm saying. He said that he must have learned it maybe in a past life or something like that. Also, then growing up, I think he mentioned something about him questioning a teacher and, the teacher not really giving him an answer that really satisfied what he was looking for, really cluing him up on, how conventional maths works as opposed to what he was thinking. And with this, it makes me think, okay, if you're, I guess, born with a certain amount of knowledge and you have all this idea, whether it came to you in your dreams and stuff, of how the world should be, does that set you up for a certain, already like a certain bias when then someone who is explaining mainstream mathematics to you and it doesn't agree with what's going on in your head? And I'm trying to understand whether or not, or at least how much time he took to really understand, conventional mathematics and the conventional way of doing things, or should I say the mainstream way that things are done, to then really break it down and understand, at least in his, according to his theory, why it's incorrect. And I think that's what a lot of people are looking for, just kind of a solid answer on why 1 × 1 = 2 and not 1. So he then goes on to talk about the periodic table. That's where it starts off and we get into the kind of meat of what Terry's saying. And essentially he's going against, the mainstream idea of protons, neutrons, electrons. And he's talking about the elements in a way of light and color, sound and tone, matter and shape, right? Now, again, this is very interesting, and I think we can't just completely push it to the side and say it's a load of rubbish, because really and truly, if we are honest with ourselves, no one can say that they understand the universe fully, or at least enough to push this to the side, right? Now, it could be like, let's say if you're looking at a 3D object, right? From one side of it, it may look a certain way and you can make certain assumptions about it. From another side, it might look a different way and you can make other assumptions about it. But overall, in the grand scheme of things, once you can understand that object fully, then you can understand it fully, right? But both sides will somehow and eventually come together. And this could be the case for this theory, right? Let's be open-minded about this. So again, this idea isn't, I wouldn't say it's super new or something that, Terrence Howard has came up with himself, right? If we look at sort of the ancient or sacred geometry and, the in some sense, the spiritual side of things, they always say like light and vibration, and they talk about, what frequency you're on and you need to raise your vibration and stuff like this. And there's also, that experiment you might have seen where there's that bowl of water, right? And as they vibrate at different frequencies, it makes different kind of shapes and geometric patterns. And again, it could be the case. So I think what Terrence Howard is saying, right, in this model is basically, each element has its own sound or tone, its own light and color, and its own matter and shape, and all these are related together. And if you can understand, so he says something about just through sound alone, if you can understand the frequency that these elements vibrate at, you can then start to change them, manipulate them, or control them, right? And again, you see this in certain cultures with like monks and stuff, where they do their meditation practices and they chant sounds and things like that. And then there's also the quote that Tesla said, where, if you want to understand the keys to the universe, then think in terms of energy, frequency, and vibration. So in this sense, and if we relate it to Terrence Howard, I'm guessing the energy is the light, the frequency is the sound or tone, and the vibration is the matter and shape, right? So again, it's been referenced throughout history a lot of times. And again, lots of people say this. You get people saying, look, you need to raise your vibration for this and that. I think the question that most people are asking, or what we want to know, is how, though? How do you manipulate these frequencies to then change matter, I'm guessing, or manipulate matter? Now, obviously, if we're talking in terms of sound and tone, I think humans can hear it, the range of frequencies that a human can hear is about from 20 hertz to 20 kilohertz or something like that, right? So obviously that makes sense, because if everything had a tone and a sound, then right now you would be hearing a bunch of noise, right? From all the hydrogen in the atmosphere and all that, you'd be hearing a bunch of noise, right? But you don't, so because you can't hear it. So is he saying that it's a case of finding out these sounds and then creating something that can make the sounds at that frequency to then manipulate these elements, or manipulate, the universe? Let me know what you think in the comments. But this, I think, is the questions that people are asking, and again, trying to bridge the gap between how his maths leads to manipulating these frequencies and how his interpretations and the statements he's saying about, the conventional mathematics being wrong, links to this stuff with the whole periodic table and understanding the fabrics of the universe better. And so next we get to Saturn, where he shows a simulation and he's able to reproduce, the rings on Saturn and the hexagon shape that's on the top of it. And so he says he does this by combining a bunch of vortexes within his linchpin configuration. So that's with these vortexes placed, like 120 degrees apart in groups of 3. And then you have, I think you've got one at the top and one at the bottom or something like that. And essentially he adds some, I think he said harmonic resonance as well. And 2 magnetic fields, a north and a south polarity. And with this, he runs the simulation and he gets, something that basically looks like Saturn, the current formation of Saturn. And again, I think what people want to know in this aspect is more information on the details and the values that went into this simulation. I think at the same time, if you're able to simulate something, which again is very impressive, if you're able to simulate something, it doesn't mean that that is how it is, if you get what I'm saying. It could, just because it looks similar or exactly the same, that might not mean that's how things are actually working. And I think, again, what we'd want to see is a detailed explanation of the values and parameters that you've put into this simulation, and making sure that everything has been, taken into account with, there's a lot that goes on with in Saturn itself, all the storms that you got within that planet, and, taking into account all those details, and then, getting that sort of explanation and seeing if it works. And also we would need to have a look at it with another simulation based on, the current conventions and how we see it currently. And I think the best way to determine this is you have a side-by-side comparison of both models, both simulations, and you see which is more like the real life Saturn. Or you take the same principles and apply it to something closer to home, maybe, an asteroid that is closer, or the moon or something like that, and then see, how closely each one simulates and how accurately each one can predict the motion of whatever planet you're looking at. The only reason I say something closer to home is because it might be easier to get data from, and then, as in real life data from, and compare it to your simulations. But that's the sort of thing that needs to be done, and I think we need to be more inviting about it, I guess, and properly look into it. And with that being said as well, we need to, get Terrence to have conversations with actual scientists who specialize in this stuff, because again, it would be really interesting to see. And I wouldn't like, because he said he had a conversation with Neil deGrasse Tyson, and he was kind of just like, I guess they said he redlined all his work, and he was kind of, pushed away from what he made out anyway. So it'd be good to see just a full-on conversation where they go through the theories, both sharing their theories. Like I said earlier, maybe Terrence Howard brings, people from his team as well to help explain, and then you've got a couple scientists within this conversation. And I think that would be a really good breakdown of something that people would love to see, and it would help people, with their own judgment. But overall, it could be the thing that helps to propel society even further. So now there are a bunch of other, ideas and stuff that were talked about in the video from, they talk about COVID and the vaccine. They talk about everything is alive, and, plants are able to communicate with each other and things like that, and his overall philosophy. So I think some of that is kind of beyond the scope of this video, or may even need their own video in terms of just because of the subject matter. But overall, what I will say about that stuff, especially like in terms of philosophy, is I think the philosophy of, everything is one big being, everything is alive, is quite a fruitful philosophy, in the sense that it's one that promotes cooperation. It's one that promotes, just love amongst one another. It's one that almost promotes, collaboration and understanding. And I do like that philosophy, and I appreciate that philosophy. And I think it's one that if more of the world was able to adopt, then we would probably see a lot more progress. Because as you know, in this world, there's a lot of fighting, a lot of wars, a lot of corruption. They also talk about the doubling of the human brain size over 2 million years, and overall, you know, humans kind of being like an unnatural thing or an outlier in terms of what we do and the things we create and how we manipulate our reality and stuff like that. And I think that is another video in itself. You know, they speak about the Anunnaki as well, which is another interesting topic, and all of that would be put into another video that I could talk about, not just, you know, in terms of what Terrence was saying, but the whole theory in itself. So if that's something you're interested in, let me know and we can delve into that in another video and what I think on that. But overall, to conclude, before we, you know, just wrap up with the comments, is, well, I think, again, I'm being open-minded, and I'm gonna, of course, take this seriously. Like I said at the start, I'm not gonna, you know, be like some of the other people I've seen who have reacted to this and just straight up call him crazy or a nutcase or attack his character, because that is not how we operate over here on this channel. I will say, again, I think everything he's discussed is very interesting. I think it should be taken seriously, and I want to see conversations with actual scientists, because, again, I'll be honest, that when it comes to certain areas of science, that's not really my forte. If anyone's interested, my area, or that I studied, was within engineering, and I worked for a company that made equipment for aircrafts and things like that. So when it comes to, you know, particle physics or chemistry, not my area of expertise. But again, I just like to say what my opinion and what I think of certain theories and phenomena that are coming out, and more importantly, the people around it. Like I said, that the first video I made was because I believed that people were just blindly believing things, which they always do, not just with Terrence Howard, but lots of other things, blindly believing things without doing their own research. So also, just to finish, I will say that, again, what I think I'm looking for and what a lot of other people are looking for is just a stronger explanation of how his mathematics then relates to his theories, you know, and if we could get a breakdown of that, that would be amazing. But until then, I guess we're just left to kind of try and figure it out for ourselves or make sense of everything that's been said so far. And finally, if you remember when he showed the magnetic field, that light design that he made, I think that honestly looked amazing. On a lighter note, you know, that looked amazing. I think if you was to have that as a design, as like a light or a lamp design for your room, that would sell like crazy. I would get one of them. I want one of them. But now let's move on to the comments. The comments, like I was saying, they were pretty mixed. Some people were agreeing with Terrence Howard and some people were disagreeing. You know, some people were saying that I should delete the video. Others were saying, thank you for making the video. So with the mathematics, there were people trying to, you know, explain the 1 × 1 = 2 thing. And I think for the people that did agree that it equals 2, I think it really just comes down to definition again. I think if you have a look, like I said at the start of the video, on Google at the definition of multiplication and then apply that to multiplication, you'll see how you can get our current answers. And again, that's why I said I think Terrence would then need to specify that this is a different definition of multiplication, what in terms of what he's doing when it comes to 1 × 1 = 2. There was another guy who said, so what's 1 apple multiplied by another apple? Apple squared. And then he's, you know, laughing about it. And that's the thing, which is where I think people are confused. 1 apple, when you multiply 1 apple 1 time, you have 1 apple. If you get what I'm saying, 1 apple times 1 is 1 apple, right? 1 apple multiplied by another apple, what are you actually trying to do? You have to ask yourself. If you've got 1 apple and then you're bringing another apple to the equation, you're just simply adding another apple. So 1 + 1, which would be 2. There's now 2 apples in the equation, in the situation, right? So I'm trying to figure out, when you say like you're multiplying an apple by another apple, or there was another guy who was using the situation of cloning himself, right? But when you say this, what are you imagining in your head? Are you imagining the apples fusing together to become some sort of greater apple, or are you simply just, you've got 1 apple and you're just adding another apple to it? So another thing to take into account when we're looking at 1 × 1 is in terms of quantities or units. For example, we have 1 meter or 1 centimeter, 1 kilometer, 1 Newton, 1 volt. We have all these different units, right? And these units are used for different quantities. So for example, if we try to use it in area, where 1 times 1, I have an image on the screen, so you can see the first cube is a 1 meter by, not cube, sorry, the first square is a 1 meter by 1 meter square, right? So you do 1 times 1, that equals 1 meter squared. So we say that the area of this square is 1 meter squared, right? So if we were to use Terrence maths and say 1 times 1 equals 2, then what does 1 times 1 meter look like? And I guess we can look at it 2 ways. So the first line, as you can see, if we have 1 meter times 1 meter, is he then saying that it looks like this, which is the 2 meters squared, which would be 1 meter times 2 meters, right? And we've got an image of what that looks like right next to it, okay? So then if that's the case, what does 1 meter squared look like? And how do we get to it? And then the other way we could look at it is he's saying that 1 meter times 1 meter equals 2 meters squared, right? And it looks like this, which is the size of the square we would get for 1 meter squared in conventional maths. And again, if this is the case, what does 1 meter squared look like? How do we work that out? So I think it would be interesting if we could get an explanation on multiple use cases of 1 times 1. And I think this is where, again, lots of people are struggling to see how it all comes together. There were also some comments about the patents that Terrence Howard has and whether or not anyone has seen all 97 of them. Me, I haven't seen all 97. I've seen a few on Google. I've also obviously seen the ones that he put within the podcast. I also came across a couple more, but they were for jewelry, like diamond jewelry. So it wasn't that related to, his theories or what he's saying, unless I'm missing something. But I'd be interested to know if anyone has found, more of the patents that he has and what they're kind of describing and things like that. That would be interesting to look at. So let me know in the comments if you have. And finally, following on from that, there is a site called terryslinchpins.com, and that site has all the details about the linchpins and the drones, and it also has a list of some of the patent files as well that you may not have come across on there. There's also a newsletters page which has a few more. So if you haven't come across some of these patents, you can check out that website and you can have a look for yourself, what they're about. But that's also, I guess, addressing another comment which was talking about the drones that he's made, and it's something that I haven't actually discussed in this video. But overall, I think, again, it's just one of those things that we need more explanation on it. So another interesting thing with these linchpin drones is that I think the patent is just for the formation in terms of, the linchpin formation. But when you look at the actual drones, I'm interested to know, one, where does the power source go? Unless it's going to be small enough that it can fit within that, linchpin configuration. And where does the CPU or control unit go in terms of the part that is giving the drone its flight instructions or receiving flight instructions, or has the built-in AI or whatever for it to do its specific function. So I'm kind of wondering where those things fit into the drone, especially when you look at the diagrams and stuff we see. But like I said, I think the pattern is just for the formation, and I would think he has some, design or some other design and prototypes of the actual drone and how it will work. It looks pretty cool. Again, it's just the explanation here. I don't think we're arguing over whether the drones will work, or in that sense, what we want to know is the explanation and how it is using the maths that he has said, and how he was talking about it. They can also be submerged in underwater, and how his maths and all that applies to this. So with that being said, this has been my longest video so far in the history of this channel. So let me know what you thought. Let me know your comments down below if you've watched this far. Again, thank you so much for watching and taking the time out of your day to, listen to what I'm saying. Also, if there are any other topics you would like me to discuss, let me know in the comments below. This channel, like I said again, is about generational excellence, self-improvement, and all sorts of subjects and matters that are going on in the world today. So let me know what you thought, and I will see you very soon.